Welcome back, friends, to another Dauntless discussion video. And as you might have gathered by now, today we're going to investigate some background information on Xelya and the rest of the Farslayers. So I think the best way to better understand this faction is to compare them with those of other universes. For example, they share many similarities to the Wood Elves of Valenwood in the Elder Scrolls universe, or the Sylvan Elves of Northern Mirkwood, led by King Thranduil from the Lord of the Rings universe. So the Shattered Isles of Dauntless' answer to the magic and mystery of the Wood Elf factions of other worlds is the Farslayers. This faction of wild and daring slayers lived on the island of Arborholm, just on the verge of the Maelstrom. For generations they established their settlement on the thick woods and foliage of the Arborholm Islands. Living in harmony in their treetop homes, the Farslayers managed to master the power of Terra Ether. With their great skill in combat and agility, they also managed to hold back the very dangerous behemoths who lived on the nearby islands. However, it was not to last. In mastering the power of the Terra Ether, the Farslayers of Arborholm may well have called down upon their own doom, as the terrifying mysterious Agaris, as well as other opportunist behemoths, laid waste to the Farslayers' home. And so Arborholm, home to the Farslayers, became a no man's land, abandoned by the survivors and left to decay, overrun by dangerous behemoths. The remaining Farslayers settled on the outskirts of Ramsgate, many giving up any hope of returning to their home. However, there's one who believes it's time to gear up, set sail, and face the horrors of the mysterious Agaris at the overgrown core of the Arborholm Blight. Xelya Farslayer. When Xelya arrived alone in Old Ramsgate as a teenager, she revealed very little about her origins. Naturally, there were theories about who she really was, including the theory that she was a princess of Typhland. But before long, Xelya showed that she could evade the most alert behemoths and had tremendous skill in tracking them to their nest, in exchange for unusual items of value mostly to her. She would help direct slayers to the rarest of creatures. Unless engaged in conversation, Xelya was most unnaturally quiet and observant, as well as patient enough to watch for hours or days, and yet decisive enough to move quickly and quietly when necessary. When she did converse, it was often a rapid pace and often jumped from topic to topic as a stream of consciousness caught up with her. But Xelya had a lot of secrets and would rarely reveal anything about her or her past, and she was most definitely comfortable when alone. But following the destruction of Old Ramsgate, and upon settling in New Ramsgate, more information was discovered about Xelya. Xelya stated that she was the sole survivor of a shipwreck on the edge of the Maelstrom when she was around 7 years old, surviving on her own for years. She was at the edge of sanity when a small band of Farslayers found the feral girl and welcomed her into the tribe. The chief of the nomadic behemoth hunters taught Xelya language again and told her how the Farslayers let the Terra guide them to the behemoths. For the Farslayers would only allow progression through their ranks if one was to prove they could kill a behemoth. The following is a reference to The Hunted, a lore page on the Dauntless website which describes Xelya's first kill of a behemoth. Casting a glance back the way she had come, she saw she had not left a trace to mark her passage. But her pursuers were no ordinary hunters. Her ears told her what her eyes denied, that they were still coming, and she had to move. The silver white moon that broke through the clouds cast a ghastly white light over the small lagoon that appeared before her as she burst through the undergrowth. And a pale mist drifted across the glass calm surface, disturbed only by the flight of a single frightened dragonfly that made its escape when its new interloper appeared. Every bone in her body wanted to follow the insect into flight, to run, to flee, to dash at breakneck speed away from the pursuit and back to her skyboard. To take flight from this island and leap on a current of ether to the next in hopes it might offer a bit more safety. It was a pattern of behaviour that had kept her alive until this point. But she also knew that the only way to go from hunted to hunter was to take control of the situation, to stop reacting and instead prepare and act. And so she was still and silent. She silenced even her own heartbeat in her ears, honing in on her pursuers, pinpointing their location, preparing to meet them when they emerged from the dense foliage. There, she thought, that's the spot, definitely. Grasping her pike with one hand, she silently positioned herself for their arrival. The first to emerge was a tall, muscular man clad in a typical wood and leather armour of the Farslayer, similar to her own, but more worn and battered. He clutched a set of chain blades crafted from the bony brow ridges of a winterhorn, and he squinted as he surveyed the silent clearing. Xelya did not give him the opportunity to see her before she struck. She brought the warpike in low, striking the Farslayer in the back of the knees, which caused him to pitch forward face first into the pond with a splash. Xelya was careful not to strike him with the blade. She wasn't a murderer after all. She followed up with a swift kick that knocked the man unconscious, and then turned towards her next attacker. This new opponent was also a Farslayer, a woman, perhaps a decade Xelya's senior. She emerged from the woods wielding an axe, but was completely unprepared for the sight of her, as Xelya was there to meet her with another kick, this time to her foe's ankle. The second attacker went down with a tortured grunt, writhing as she clutched badly her sprained ankle. The third pursuer was not so reckless. Having seen Xelya quickly handle his companions, this one stayed at the edge of the woods, manoeuvring for a better angle to strike. Xelya knew he was there, but did everything she could to hide it, pretending to search the tree line, sniffing the air curiously, and telling the groaning woman with the injured ankle to be quiet. After a few minutes of this, her third pursuer apparently decided he was in the clear. She heard a rasping sound as his bone sword cleared its woven scabbard, and still she did not react. Xelya had to admit that this third hunter was impressively silent as he approached her. Still convinced she was unaware of his presence, it wasn't until she raised her warpike to block his strike that he realised he would never had a chance. Xelya grinned at the man's surprise, then took advantage of his shock to knock his sword away and break his nose with the shaft of her pike. The hunter staggered back, off-balanced, and clutching his face, which spewed blood. "Well," Xelya said, as she twirled her warpike with the slightest hint of a swagger, "have you figured it out yet?" The man just made a pained sound through his blocked nose. Xelya turned to the first two, just as the attacker was regaining his consciousness. "Is that it? Did I pass your test, you fancy pants Farslayers?" she said. "You broke my nose," squealed the third hunter. "Yep," Xelya replied. "So we good?" The first hunter got back to his feet and picked up his chain blades. "Good," he said. "I'll tell you when we're..." Before he could finish his sentence, he had the briefest of moments to hear the whistling sound and turned his head skyward just in time to see the razor-tipped quill that plunged into his thigh and out the other side. The man began to cry out, but Xelya silenced him with a look. "Stay put, you'll bleed if you don't. Just wait here or die, your call." She could spare no time for the foolish Farslayer, and Xelya did not really care if she passed the test. Without a word, she pulled the woman with the sprained ankle to her feet. Together, the three who could still move turned to face the enraged quill shot that barreled down the rise to face them. "So," Xelya said, "like I said, we good?" "We're good," winced the woman. Her companion just nodded and hefted his chain blades whilst his pinned down compatriot whimpered encouragement from behind them. With a roar that bellied like a diminutive frame, Xelya, the Farslayer, charged into the fray. After a successful kill, the tribe then lived peacefully for a time in the lush, ether-rich island. And those years were the best of her life, but it wouldn't last. It was a freak event that everyone in the Shattered Isles fears. An island crash. On a long hunt away from the camp, when the disaster struck, Xelya then again found herself to be a lone survivor, as a floating pile of spinning rubble was her tribe's final moments. And she could no longer stand the solitude, and she found her way to old Ramsgate and made her camp on the edge of town, befriending the only one there bold enough to approach her, Cat Sorrel. And when Cat asked Xelya to help her defend the strange, smelly city, the Farslayer then felt the terror push her to accept. And so she lived in old Ramsgate for a time, helping the Slayers to track and hunt the behemoths. And of course, when old Ramsgate was destroyed in the Umbral event, she moved with the rest of the population to New Ramsgate. And as the dreaded Agaris lay waste to Aberholm, home to the rest of the Farslayers, Xelya and Cat Sorrel assisted the survivors. Now all living at the edge of New Ramsgate, the remaining Farslayers have proclaimed Xelya their new leader, which she has reluctantly come to accept due to her shy nature. I guess being a leader doesn't feel very brave. Not all the time. Feels like I'm hiding while someone else takes the risk. Because I am, which is a quote from Xelya herself. So Xelya is now feeling optimistic about slaying the Agaris and returning the Farslayers to their home. But patiently, she'll say, it's just going to take time, effort, help from our friends, and a whole lot of slaying. Until then, we'll make a home here in Ramsgate. It's worked for me so far. So I hope this second video in my Dauntless discussion series was in any way helpful or enjoyable. If I'm being completely honest, I found Xelya a little bit strange when I first met her in Ramsgate. But after investigating the character history, I think it's clear to see why. I mean, considering she spent her childhood in solitude in the wild, only to be found and embraced by another Farslayer tribe, who taught her well and gave her confidence, only for that tribe, who she considered family, to perish as a result of an island collision, only for her to then be told she's now the leader of the Farslayers who survived the Agaris attack. So it's clear to see that Xelya Farslayer is actually a really in-depth character. And for the Farslayers as a whole, I really like their history. I'm a big fan of fantasy and mythology, so I think they add a lot to the Dauntless universe. With players able to defeat the Agaris as part of an escalation hunt, it would be really interesting to see if Xelya could fulfill her wish of returning the Farslayers back to Aberholm, maybe see it become another town or hub world which the player could explore in-game. But I think I'll leave it at that. As always, all comments and feedback is greatly appreciated, and until next time, see ya.